All right, so if we go to the next couple of slides, next slide. Just want to welcome everyone, and on the next slide, remind everyone of the project team and the consultant team that you'll be working with throughout this. We won't go through the whole list, but this is just our reminder. And we do have one change in our Clark County staff, so I wanted to turn it to Jenna to talk about that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to provide an update. Those of you who may know Gary Albrecht, he has an exciting new job, so he is transitioning off of this project. So we're bringing in one of our other transportation planners, Harrison Houston. So you'll see him at meetings in the future. So just wanted to let you all know that.
All right, thanks, Jenna. And folks will introduce themselves as we go through the meeting. And I am Sylvia Tuborowski, helping to facilitate this community advisory group. Next slide. Okay, so today we have a pretty packed 3 hours ahead of us. If you remember at our last meeting, we started to get your ideas for a vision statement, a vision for this climate change planning work. And Jenna has worked really hard to turn that into a second draft vision statement. So we'll look through that today and hope to get your thoughts and see if maybe we're ready to have that be the vision, adaptable vision as we move forward. We can talk about more about that later too. And then Dana Hellman is going to share updates on the resilience sub-element work. So again, linking this to the last meeting, we talked a bit about climate hazards and impacts and assets in the community to be protected. So she'll just remind people of all that work and how it connects to the rest of developing the resilience piece of the climate element. And then the biggest chunk of our time together is going to be introducing the goals and policies for the resilience piece, as well as brainstorming what those goals could be. So we have a fun, you in the room see the sticky pages around the room that we'll get to use for a brainstorming activity, and we'll also do that with online folks through a Jamboard. So we'll talk about that more then. So those are the pieces we want to cover today. And if we go to the next slide, we have our agenda. So we'll start with just some regular updates, then do about half an hour on the vision statement, get that resilience recap, do a quick break, and then really spend a good chunk of time on the goals brainstorming activity. And then we have 10 minutes for public comment. There's always public comment at these meetings, and then some time for wrap up and next steps. Okay, next slide. So just some reminders as we're joining today in this hybrid environment. If you are a CAG member online, then you should be joined as a panelist. So if you're getting a notification to be promoted to a panelist, please accept that, and members of the public will be here in the Zoom platform as attendees, so we can differentiate. CAG members, please do stay on mute when you're not speaking and join by video if you're able to, especially when you're speaking. We know you might not be able to the whole time. And when we get to our discussion portions, you can press the little raise hand button at the bottom to make a comment, ask a question. And if you're in the room, you can just kind of do this with your tent card, and we'll get to your comments and questions. And if you have any Zoom issues, just contact Grant at gsimmons@kernswest.com, and he can help you out. And as we go through our discussions, we just ask that you say your name and affiliation before you speak so that everyone knows who you are. And then move around, take care of yourself as needed. If you're in the room, there's some food back here as an incentive for coming in person. And if you're at home, you might also be needing to get some dinner. So feel free to get up and do that. Take care of yourself as needed. And also in the room, just for the microphones, you remember these were a fun, finicky exercise last time. It's built-in team building to figure out how to use these together. So, push the button to unmute, and then right when you're done speaking, push it again to mute and to turn it back to red. If there's too many mics on at a time, there's some feedback. And you might have to get closer to project your voice into the mic. Let's see. Oh, I'll also say for the chat here in the Zoom platform, we want to reserve that as much as possible to, if you can't bring a comment into the conversation, fine to use it, but we really want to promote dialogue, so would encourage folks to bring your comments and concerns, questions into the conversation. Just raise your hand if you're a CAG member to do that, rather than using the Zoom for a lot of substantive conversation, which can sometimes get a little bit distracting. But useful for putting in links and if you need any help in the Zoom platform as well. Okay, next slide. All right, these are just some reminders about how to raise your hand. The raise hand button's at the bottom. If you need closed captioning, there's also just a button at the bottom that says CC, and you can choose closed captioning for yourself. And it will just appear for yourself, which is a nice feature. And next slide. And we reviewed these meeting discussion guidelines last time, but just a reminder to really, we have a good agenda today, so we'll try to stay on topic and honor the agenda as much as possible. I will do my best to try to make sure we're hearing from lots of people, but please chime in if you feel like you haven't been able to speak. And bring your ideas, concerns in as early as possible, just honestly and openly upfront. That bringing concerns in early means they can be addressed early in the process. And really, we're hoping that folks can sit in each other's shoes, understand each other's perspectives, and speak with respect. And I just reminded everyone about the chat etiquette. All right, next slide. Okay, we will have public participation towards the end of today's meeting, and I just wanted to get a show of hands. If you are a member of the public, if you don't mind pressing the raise hand button at the bottom, if you plan to provide comment, that just gives us a good sense. And if you're on phone, you can press *9. I'm not going to call your names now, but we just want to see how many folks might want to make a comment. Not seeing any hands yet, but we'll circle back to that. So at 8:10, we'll have a public comment period, and we'll go over the protocols for that then, but about 2 minutes apiece. And of course, comments that are relevant to the topics that were discussed today. So, the vision statement, the goals, development would be most useful in today's meeting. All right, I'm almost done talking. Next slide. All right, so a little bit of old business. In your meeting packets that you got online, you should have received our past meeting summaries from our joint first meeting with the EJC, the Environmental Justice Coalition, and then also from the second meeting of the CAG. And hopefully you all got a chance to review those, but we do want to give folks an opportunity to say if something is incorrect or needs to be corrected in those. So maybe I'll just take a pause to see if anyone had any concerns about anything in the meeting summaries. Okay, then we'll assume those are approved and we'll finalize them. And going forward, always just give them a review, getting some comments in within a week. If you do see any issues with the summaries would be helpful so that we can get them posted in a timely manner. And also in your meeting packets, you should have received the final process and engagement plan. You received that in your past meeting packets too, but it is now a final document. There were a couple of edits. Do you have that? Next slide. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenna for some updates.
All right, so this is Jenna again. So I'm just going to run down my list of miscellaneous updates for you all, so thanks in advance for bearing with me. So first, I want to remind you all to complete your open government training if you haven't done so already. You all have, whenever we have a new board or group, you have 90 days to take the training, so I'll be checking, I think I've maybe seen about half of the group has done it, so I'll be following up with those of you if I haven't seen your submittal. And if you did it and maybe didn't press the button to submit, anyway, I'll just follow up with you so you know if I haven't seen it yet, so that we get those done by the next meeting. Okay, next, I also just want to periodically remind you to not reply all to any email or calendar invite that we send you. We will try to, when we notice it happen, we'll try to say something because we want to make sure it's on something innocuous. So when it does happen by accident, just to make sure we're following the Open Public Meetings Act. So if everybody does it by accident at some point, but just we'll keep reminding you. Okay, also wanted to note, we are including public comments or receiving between meetings in your meeting materials. Each month, we did have one just come in the other day, so we updated what had been posted a week before, so that'll sort of see how it works is we'll basically keep updating up until the meeting, and then the next batch of comments that come in, you'll see it in your next meeting packet. We also wanted to note, some of you all have shared feedback with us between meetings, either, maybe additional thoughts on like the vision statement or just other thoughts related to this project. And so we are also going to start posting those comments. So we'll have like a CAG member comments since the last meeting item in your meeting materials. And the reason we'd like to do that is for us at the county, it helps make sure we're being really transparent. So, any sort of feedback that's been given from members of the group, anybody can see. It also just helps us document, it helps us keep track of all those comments too by compiling them on a monthly basis. So we know some of you really like to share ideas with us in between meetings. Keep at it, but just know that we're going to be posting those online. If it's like a logistical question, we're not going to post that. It's just like substantive ideas. Okay, so that's that. Okay, I also wanted to note, you all may have seen a news release that went out earlier this week. We have a survey out right now about severe weather. The county, this is sort of our first broad community public engagement related to this project. So if you know people who you think might be interested in weighing in, please feel free to forward that along to others. That survey is open until May 12th, and our hope is that anyone in the public can participate, right? And it'll build onto what you all are sharing and what our Environmental Justice Coalition is sharing with us to get even more people's input into thinking about this resilience topic. Okay, so the county is working on that. Similarly, our Environmental Justice Coalition members are starting their work on public engagement. So a few of them have held a few of their activities so far, and there's a lot more being planned in the near future. So as we hear back, as the county gets our feedback from the survey, as the Environmental Justice Coalition hears back from the people they're talking with in their communities, we're going to start to bring that back to you all in this meeting. So our goal is to bring everybody along together. As we hear feedback, we want to make sure everybody is then hearing a summary of what we're hearing so that it's being considered as we move through the project. Let's see. And then the other thing I wanted to note about our Environmental Justice Coalition, they will be working on the equity lens at their next meeting in May, which is something we'll be using, to help evaluate policy ideas once we have some to consider. And so we'll have more updates related to that too once they do that work. We do have 3 EJC members in this group as well. So I also just wanted to pause to see if Monica, Gabriella, or Alana, if there's anything else you'd add to that high-level summary of a little bit of what the EJC has been up to.
I can just add what I'm putting together for my event, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So I've created an event that is three different dates: May 25th, June 20th, and September 7th, and it's going to be at the 4th Plane Forward Community Commons. And it's going to be from 11 a.m. until 3 p.m. And I believe that if you want to get something from the community, you give them something in return. And so I created an event where we come together and we're doing truth, racial healing, and transformation healing circles, where we actually talk about racism, where we see it in our community, what has been done to us, what have we made judgments on other people, and how we can work together as a community to overcome this. The next one is Introduction to Donut Economics, where everyone in the community can thrive within the means of our planetary boundaries. Then after that is an art session where we draw what we want to see in our communities, or you have the option of doing the surveys that the county has provided. And then after that, it's food and dancing, because, if we have a lot of hard topics to discuss, but also food brings people together, and music from around the world. So, and it's going to be in Spanish and also Chuukese are going to be the 2 languages that it's going to be translated in. So yeah, I will send you all that information if you want to join. I'm inviting everyone. So big and small. And so meaning, I don't know what that means. I was thinking of ants, but anyway, I'm just inviting the whole community because it's our community. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And then I've just got a couple other updates. So another one is, so as you all may recall, this climate project is part of the broader county's comprehensive plan update project. So just wanted to flag, in late May, May 28th, 29th, and 30th, there's going to be some open houses for the comprehensive plan project as a whole, related to kicking off the environmental impact statement process that goes along with that broader project. So that's just a heads up, there'll be more communication around that as we get closer to the date, but just wanted to note that. And then finally, my last comment was, we received a question recently which reminded me to say this, that so we received a question around, the initiative around repealing the Climate Commitment Act, and it's reminding me to tell you all that we are not allowed to talk about politics in this group. So we, with elections, we can't talk about elections. With initiatives that are going to be on the ballot, we're not allowed to talk about them. It's per county policy. So I just wanted to say that. You all can have all those conversations outside of this room with whomever you like, but that's not something we're allowed to do as part of a county advisory board. So I think that's it for my updates.
All right, thank you, Jenna, and thanks, Monica, for sharing about your event. It sounds food and dancing, that's amazing, I love it. Okay, so next we're gonna move into our vision statement topic, and I'll hand it over to Jenna in just a second again. But just a reminder, at our last meeting, you all started providing some great input for a vision statement, as well as after that meeting. And so Jenna's gonna go a little bit more into the purpose of the vision statement, how it's going to be used, and how it has been updated based on your comments. And then we want to kind of have a little bit of a discussion, see, is this, is this close? Is this generally something that you can agree with as a vision for the work that we're going to be doing together, knowing that it's also changeable, right? Like at the end of this process, we can revisit the vision statement and say, does this actually need some tweaks now that we've done more of the work? But is it a good guide for us for the next 8 months or so? So I'll turn it over to Jenna.
All right, can we go to the next slide? And we hear the next slide. Okay, so first of all, thank you all again for the feedback at the last meeting, and then a couple of folks had additional thoughts after the meeting that they shared with us on the vision statement. So we at the county, we've reviewed all the feedback, and I wanted to sort of outline the thought process we went through with sort of each piece of feedback that we heard. And we tried to document this in the meeting material that, we had the vision statement we had at the last meeting, the feedback, how we addressed it, and then a revised vision statement. So one thing we considered was, is this feedback something that can be, is it like high level and vision-y? And so what I mean by that is, when we're talking about a vision, we're trying to paint a picture about what the future looks like 20 years from now. And it's supposed to be a little bit fuzzy. It's, we don't really know all the details, but can help paint a picture. So based on the feedback, is it something that sort of fit at that level? For feedback we got that was a lot more specific, I think we're tracking that for future reference as we get more into the details on this project. But we did also look, is this specific idea, does it fit within the broader concept? Because we're trying to, again, paint in broad strokes right now. And then there were a few comments we got that we just noted if it seemed like it was outside the scope of this project, because we also want to make sure we are setting clear expectations. So if someone gave feedback that maybe wasn't tied to climate change, we made a note that, that's probably outside the scope of us working on the climate element. And there was also a comment on something about holding polluters accountable. And I made a note just to clarify that, in planning projects, we really are only allowed to look forward, right? The things that we do can only affect us moving forward. Planning laws don't allow us to go do things retroactively. So again, just trying to set the expectations when we see a piece of feedback that we're just not sure we're going to be able to address as part of this project. So those were the types of things we considered as we thought through each piece of feedback. And then I think one of the things that stood out at the last meeting was there was some interest in like trying to make the vision statement much more concise and, you know, something people could memorize and say off the top of their head. And then there was also some interest to have a little bit more explanation in there. And so when I explain the second vision statement, I'll try to show how I was trying to find the balance between those two different interests. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the revised vision statement that was that we shared in your meeting materials. But since we shared it a week ago, I have a slight revision. So I'm going to ask Nicole to go to the next slide, and I'm going to share my proposed slightly modified version of that, which I just modified the first sentence. So, so I'm just going to read through this. So the thing that I changed since sharing this with you all last week was actually splitting it, rather than calling the whole thing a vision statement, making the first sentence essentially the purpose statement of this project, what it is we're trying to do, and then the second part, the vision statement. So I'll just read through this. So the purpose of this project and the climate element that we're writing is to implement House Bill 1181 and create a climate chapter to support Clark County meeting its community's greenhouse gas emissions reduction, vehicle miles traveled reduction, resilience, and environmental justice goals. So the legislation tells us we have to do this. So that's the purpose. And then for the vision statement, I was trying to use bold text as the short, concise version of the vision statement. So you could read the vision statement as, in 2045, Clark County will have good stewardship, better health equity, green jobs, transformed transportation, energy and waste systems, and prepared for uncertainty. So that's the short version. But for those of you who want a little bit of more explanation and context behind what that means, that's what the additional text was for. So the longer version, you know, would read, in 2045, Clark County will have good stewardship, we meet our entire community's basic needs and live within the means of our environment, better health equity, we all live in neighborhoods with clean air, easy access to community and open spaces, and healthy food systems, green jobs, we are a thriving hub for innovative, sustainable businesses and green workforce development, transform transportation, energy, and waste systems. We all have easy access to clean transportation options, resilient and renewable energy sources, and waste materials are viewed as a resource. And prepared for uncertainty, we are educated and ready to cope with weather emergencies and uncertainties. So this is our proposed version to work from for the discussion today. And I'm going to pass it back to Sylvia to facilitate conversation around that.
Sure, thank you, Jenna. Yeah, so again, I think, you know, this vision statement is meant to help this group with its work over the next 8 months and is revisable if we think it needs to be towards the end. But we want to make sure that it is something that works for you all. So I'm just going to open it up to the group to just ask, does it seem like this statement incorporates what's important to protect in the community and is, you know, an adequate statement of how you want to move forward in the face of climate change? And if not, you know, why not? And hopefully we're not doing like real wordsmithing here. It sort of just is this generally a statement that you can live with. And if not, we do need the why and the what is your proposed alternative, because we're kind of at that point in the process too where, you know, we don't want to generally know why, we want to know specifically what needs to be changed. So I'll hand it over to the room now. Again, if you're in the room, just do this if you want to chime into the conversation, and if you're online, just raise your hand. And I see a hand up from Monica, so I'll go to you first and see if others have thoughts too. Go ahead, Monica. And also a reminder to say your name before you speak as we're kind of getting to know each other and for the public. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Monica Zazweta. And when I read this, I was clapping and saying yes and doing my finger snaps because I got very excited with the wording of this. I am happy from the very beginning. It says that this is something that we have to do according to the legislature. And so I'm like, yes, that's awesome that is in there. And then I loved seeing the good stewardship. We meet, oh, my baby's crying. We meet our entire community's basic needs and live within the means of our environment. I was like, yes. So I just want to thank you so much for this vision statement. I'm smiling from ear to ear right now, and I'm looking forward to hearing other people's thoughts on this because always, someone says something and I'm like, oh, wait, yeah. Then I think of what they say. So, but yeah, no, thank you so much to you all who created this. And I'm giving you the biggest hug for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. That's great. I'm glad this made you clap. Others? Yeah, Dawn.
Testing, okay, it works. So it's not quite acceptable to me because it doesn't say what the goals are. Like it says, the environmental justice goals. What are the goals? Like how much reduction in emissions and how much reduction in vehicle miles traveled. Mostly how much emissions reductions. The state has a goal, 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and about 95% below 1990 levels by 2045. And so we would want to have the 2045 goal, the state goal. The state policy says the state shall, doesn't say may. And if we don't know if we don't have a goal, we're not going to get there. And I would like to have interim targets like the 2030 target, because it's so easy to say 2045, we're going to be dead by then. And at least some of us, me, most likely. And we need interim targets. Otherwise, we just wait till we don't do anything now. We need to do something this year and next year.
Thanks, Dawn. And I see a couple other hands up here, so I'll go to Dave and then Nick.
Yeah, this is Dave Rowe. I like the idea of reducing vehicle miles traveled reduction, and greenhouse emissions reduction. Those are all good goals, and I'd like to see if we can make some additional, like rail could be added to the transportation options. And this is something that I'm kind of a rail nut, that I think rail in Europe and Japan and China is so much more cleaner, and they reduce vehicle traveled, auto travels by using rail vehicles. So I just want to add that comment that should be part of our vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And Nick?
I'm just thinking about other projects I went through, and this vision with Don's comment about goals. Are we going to not do that? Are we going to set some goals later on from this vision statement? Again, a vision statement, I like the way you said it. It doesn't need to be this big bulky thing that nobody understands, and it would be, I think, I'm going to congratulate you on a job well done with expressing what I looked at, and I totally agree with what you're trying to say here. So I think we just leave it as it is, and again, later on in the process, we can talk about the goals that need to be required to get to the vision statement. To me, this vision statement is just looking out to try to accomplish something, and then we break it down into different goals at that point. So that's my comments.
Yeah, that's helpful, Nick. And I see a couple of other hands up. Before we go to those, I don't want to put Dana and Jenna on the spot, but it might be helpful to talk, and we're talking about goals later today. So maybe if you just kind of want to address a little bit the difference between what could be goals or vision at this point could be helpful, and then continue the CAG conversation.
I can start. Yeah, this is Jenna, and then Dana, feel free to chat. You've been thinking very much about the resilience goals, I know. Yeah, and I think this is something we've struggled with. I mean, you all saw the first version to this one. We kept saying, okay, wait, is this a goal or is this, we're trying to what does it look like, but we don't want to talk about how we're going to get there or the specifics yet when we're thinking of the vision. So I do think that's something we have struggled with in terms of thinking about what types of words to use. But right, the vision is sort of this broad thing, but we have to come up with goals. And like to Don's point, like we are going to come up with numerical goals and interim goals. Like we have to do that as part of this project, following the Commerce guidance. So I don't know if I have a clear response here, besides that we have been struggling with this as well, right? And it's a hard thing to do. So that's my probably non-helpful answer, but we have been thinking about this a lot too. Like, you know, we haven't really, we'll talk about the goals, the state goal, what the county has to, like for greenhouse gas reductions emissions, we're gonna have to have that conversation and we're gonna have to set 5-year interim targets. But I don't think we're quite ready to do that yet without looking at some data specific to the county. So I think that was one reason it felt premature to put like numbers in here, which, you know, so that's why we didn't do it. And while but we hear you and yes, we will get there. So anyway, so that's just some initial thoughts, but I'm curious because Dana has been thinking about this a lot because of our later activity, if she has anything to add.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jenna just shared. And from my perspective, the big difference between the vision statement and the goals is just the level of specificity. So to me, a vision statement is like big picture, what do you want to see? What do you imagine for the county? And the goals are more specific and they can be paired with policies which point towards actions. So it's just a kind of a narrowing down. And yes, we are going to begin the process of goal setting later today. So it's coming really soon.
Thanks, Dana. That's helpful. All right, I'm going to go online to Justin Wood and then Janet, and then we can go to Terry and Noel.
Thank you. Again, Justin Wood, a CAG member here. Really in general agreement with everything on the vision statement right now. Did want to bring up just one point about the good stewardship, quote, and live within the means of our environment. I know this is kind of overarching big goals, but kind of pretty subjective with that language. Are we going to a biological principle of carrying capacity? Are we protecting our critical areas and water resources? So my view would be we probably need to be a little more specific there just because it means different things to different people. But that was my comment.
Thanks, Justin. And do you have ideas for what you would want to see for more specificity there?
On the lines of good stewardship, I think protecting our natural areas, critical areas, natural resources. So more of a protecting what we have. Again, just a little subjective with living within the means of our environment. That just means different things to different people. So.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, Janet?
Perfect. Thank you. I'm Janet Konevsky on the CAG. I like it. I think I appreciate you guys taking the time. It's almost ready to put on a t-shirt with some of the suggestions. I do like Dawn's measurable and your clarification, Sylvia and Dana and Jenna, on getting to that point, because I think we measure our success by that. So I think that's perfect. And then also, I think when we talk about rail, I think that's definitely important, probably could be inferred under the vehicle, reducing the vehicle miles traveled. So I think that might already be in there, keeping it high level and still actionable, probably covering as an umbrella several different modes of transportation. So I appreciate it. I just wanted to say I like it, and I appreciate you guys hearing us.
Thanks, Janet. Okay, let's go to Terry. And did you put your tent down? No. Okay, Terry first and then Noel.
So knowing that goals work is coming up, I wholeheartedly support this as a vision statement for us. I think it's pretty clear and agree with it.
basically had the same thing to say. I guess I would just say I appreciate the purpose and the vision being separated. That made a lot more sense to me. So
Great, thank you. I'll go to Nelson and then Brent and then to Monica.
Thank you, Sylvia, and thanks to the whole team for refining this based on the feedback that we provided at our last meeting. I too agree with the comments that have already been said. I love the fact that the purpose and vision have been separated. I'm happy with the vision as presented. I can get on board with that very easily, and I also agree with Dawn's statements about specific goals. And I'm excited that that's an exercise coming up, and I look forward to seeing a vision statement which is separate from the goals, but I really want to see, I'm thinking more along the lines of like how we do strategic planning, for example. We have a mission, vision, values, and then we have our objectives and goals. And so separate pieces to it, but all moving toward the same purpose. And so that's what I'd like to see as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson. I think a lot of you are really going to love the second part of today's meeting on goals. Really where you want to go to, which is great. Brent?
Okay, I'm Brent Marsden, and for the vision, there are 5 categories there, and I don't see that the first 3 have anything whatsoever to do with climate change, and that's what our group is. These are ideals for a good community, and if climate change is as serious as my research indicates it is, we're going to be lucky to have communities at all, instead of just going for ideal communities. So I think our vision statement, the purpose now is good, but I think our vision statement should have to do with climate change, because that's why this group is here.
All right, and I will put you on the spot, Brent, to say then what would something that has to do with climate change look like, if not those 3 first bullets?
Well, it's going to look like the last 2 bullets with, you know, addressing other areas. And you don't want too much input from me right now, because I did a lot of research and I could probably do a lecture and you don't want to hear that. But it's a huge topic, as we all know. And so this is going to require more homework for me to better answer your question, but I think there are openings to do that. So,
okay, thank you, Brent. I'll go back online to Monica and then Kathy.
Awesome, thank you. So I was taking notes from Justin's comments on the means of our environment, and so that there's an ecological ceiling that comprises of 9 planetary boundaries proposed by the International Group of Earth System Scientists led by Johan Rockström and Will Steffen. And this is all in the book Donut Economics. And it's about climate change, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus loading, freshwater withdrawals, land conversion, biodiversity loss, air pollution, and ozone layer depletion. And so maybe even having a conversation here about what the means of our environment is, but not putting that in the vision statement. But then also, I mean, the word rewilding our communities. So we can not just, have a sustainable environment, but also rewild, like that goes hand in hand with rewilding and giving back to our Mother Earth. So I just wanted to make those comments in there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. And Kathy?
She or her. So my comment is, I know that a lot of work goes into creating these statements. So thank you for doing all this, Jenna. I know it's hard to Frankenstein so many opinions. Sorry to add yet another opinion. So I think in general, when you were talking about the concise statement, what that means to me is if you can read only the bold words, the vision should make sense. And so to me, I was a little bit challenged because with stewardship, I had to go make sure I understood the definition of stewardship. Like I went to go Google it to make sure I understood. Health equity was a little bit ambiguous to me. And then, sorry, for just grammatical reasons, the last bullet point isn't grammatically aligned with the rest because it's not a noun. But what I was trying to get at versus being nitpicky was, you know, is there a way that you could concisely say all those bold words together in a statement? It so happened that Brent's comment around how do you emphasize what's most important to climate change happened to be maybe the order that I wrote it. And I'm not suggesting this as the final edit at all, but for example, I wrote in 2045, Clark County will be prepared for climate uncertainty, which just happened to promote the 5th bullet point, and equitably meet our community's needs for basic necessities, a clean environment, green jobs, and transform transportation, energy, and waste systems. So I'm by no means great at writing, but I hope that that captures the nature of what I'm trying to say, which is, does the vision make sense when you only look at the bold words?
All right, thank you, Kathy. That was helpful. I think we hopefully wrote that down somewhere, but if you want to write it down too in the chat, then we could all kind of take a look at it. And we have the recording.
Yeah, I'll put it in the
And
chat,
maybe,
but
you know,
don't take it as final. Thanks.
Yes, appreciate that. Thank you, Kathy. I'll go to Andrea and then I'll kind of do a check with the room.
Perfect. Andrea here with the CAG. I would like to, I guess, voice my support for the prong number 2, having better health equity, just because I feel like that gets at the overarching goal of like environmental justice and some of the things that we can do in terms of planning along those lines. So, but I support the last speaker, who I think it was Kathy. I support a lot of what she said. I think that boils down the prongs a little bit better.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And any other comments before we maybe do a check on where we are with this vision statement? Okay, so yeah, of course. Let's go to Nick and then Brent.
Okay, fill me in on how we vote for this. Sorry, I forgot always put my name. Nick Massey with CAG Group.
Well, so I would love to do around the room, just sort of thumbs up, thumbs down on where we are with the vision statement, but I'm hearing several things. So I'm going to get back to that, maybe hear Brent's comment, and then I'll answer your question.
Brent Marsden, and Jenna said something earlier. It was talking about holding polluters responsible. And if I heard her correctly, she said we shouldn't focus on the past. But Jenna, what makes you think that nobody's going to pollute in the future? And when they do, shouldn't they be held responsible? So I think that should be considered. That sort of thing should be considered, because it's this has been the approach of some governments and so forth to hold those who are fostering climate change responsible, and I think that could be a part of this vision.
Okay, thank you, Brent. So I'm just going to summarize some of the changes that I heard throughout this conversation, and some of them are conflicting, and I might just turn it back to the group to consider how we can reconcile some of these pieces. I also just want to remind everyone about the level of the vision statement. I think the responses from Jenna and Dana were really helpful on the difference between goals and vision, and the fact that a lot more stuff can live in the goals, right? If we want a vision statement that's a little bit more elevated, it can't by definition include all of the words that we might want to use to describe what we're doing. But you know, some of the more specific things that I heard just now, like a lot of people just really liked this vision statement as it is. There maybe was some concern with the first bullet around good stewardship. Is that really capturing what we want to do? And do we want to talk more about protecting natural areas and resources there instead of living within the means of our environment? I heard also some concern that maybe some of this doesn't have a lot to do with climate change, but then also heard, yeah, even if it's not directly related to climate change, some of these things are really important, like EJ equity is important for this group. And then, you know, there was a suggestion from Kathy on a kind of shortening and reordering some of these statements. So that's where we are. Maybe we'll just turn it to the group to see, does anyone have an idea for a proposal for, you know, what to move forward with for a vision statement, kind of considering all of this? Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, keep it as is and let's go on.
Okay, there's one idea. Any other ideas? All right, I have a second from Nelson. We're not a Robert's Rules of Order group, but I still love the seconding. I might just do a check around the room to see, you know, thumbs up if you can live with this for now, knowing that we can revisit it in, you know, 5 or 6 months once we've really developed goals and have done more of the work and see what the rest of it looked like.
But that's exactly what you said when we started here. This is a starting point. This is a moving target. We can always come back and say, hey, this doesn't work, let's adopt something else. But to spend a whole bunch of time trying to wordsmith this, like you said, I just think for myself, it's good as it is. And yeah, we can sit here all night and improve word standards or rearrange some things, but when we get to the end of the day, it's going to have the same message as it has now. So that's my point. I love the work that the county did on it, and I think we should reflect on that. They worked hard on it and appreciate that and move forward.
Okay, appreciate that, Nick. So I'll ask, if you're in the room, if you can live with this for now, knowing that it can be revisited, just put your 10 card up, keep it up. And then if you're online, give a thumbs up. And maybe just put yourself off mute if you don't agree, because I don't know if we have the reactions available. All right, I'm seeing 10 cards up and thumbs up from everyone except for one person. So I'm going to let that person think about what you would like to say now.
Brent Marsden. In general, I like what Nick said and his ideas, and I would not vote no, I would just abstain. The only danger I see is that if you let it go forward the way it is, and that can happen, these things tend not to be changed. But if we can keep in mind that we're going to seriously revisit this, then I'm okay with it. But, you know, I'm not happy with it as is. But if we're really going to address it in the future, then I think Nick's points are good.
All right, thank you, Brent. Appreciate that. I think we can commit to revisiting it. And sounds like it's good. Nelson, do you have one more thought?
Yeah, I just was going to say I appreciate Brent's comments, and I think it's up to the members of the CAG to remember that, keep that front of mind, so as we do progress down the road, we remember that we have the opportunity to address that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Nelson. So I think that's like our first kind of agreement in principle with this group. Nice job, everyone. Okay, great. So we'll have that as the vision statement and then revisit it later on. And I think that's it for the vision statement. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dana now. We're going to shift gears and start talking a little bit more about the resilience element. And so we started on this topic at our last CAG meeting. So this is kind of an informational piece for the next 15 minutes here, just a reminder of kind of what you've done and how it's connected. Just a minute. Thank you. So just informational on kind of what we did, and I know some CAG members weren't here last time, so this will be a good kind of filling you in on what you missed. And then this will link to the next piece of today's meeting, which will be the goals brainstorming. So over to you, Dana.
Thank you. All right, next slide, please. Thanks. So just a really high-level reminder here, the company I work for, Kappa Strategies, is providing consultation on the resilience sub-element. And so that's going to be paired with the greenhouse gas sub-element in this larger climate planning project. So I have just a simple definition here for those who aren't really familiar with the concept of resilience. This is from the Department of Commerce guidance, and I think it sums it up nicely. Resilience is ongoing process of anticipating, preparing for, and adapting to changes in climate, and minimizing negative impacts to our natural systems, infrastructure, and communities. And another way that I like to define resilience even more concisely is just to say, when we're thinking about resilience, we're thinking about opportunities to make our communities more prepared and more able to bounce back from climate-related stress. Next slide, please. So for those of you who were here in our last meeting, you'll probably recognize this graphic. We started the process of exploring climate impacts. So we talked about some of these hazards that you see here: extreme heat, drought, wildfire and smoke, flooding, landslides, storms, and particularly talked about some interactions between these different hazards. So something I just want to remind us to keep thinking about through this process is that even though a lot of times we're talking about specific hazards one at a time, there's a lot of interrelationship and interplay between these hazards. So if you look in the bottom right there, one easy example to kind of conceptualize is if you have a storm with heavy rains, that can produce flooding, which can lead to landslides. So just thinking about some interactions like that. And we also talked last time about how these hazards might impact different sectors, such as agriculture, human health and well-being, energy, and others. And we'll revisit that sector conversation shortly. Next slide, please. Something else that we did in our last meeting, you all may remember, we kind of bombarded you with a ton of maps and charts. So we were looking last time at climate projections using climate indicators that came from that University of Washington Climate Exploration web tool. And so we picked out some key indicators related to each hazard and showed what was likely to happen with those indicators in the near term, so the period from 2020 to 2049, under a high emissions or business as usual scenario. So we got to see kind of where those changes were most pronounced, where in the county. And then we also asked you all to share with us last time some of the experiences that you've had with different hazards and how you've been impacted by them. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a list of 7 hazards. These are the 7 that we are planning to move forward with from here on out and kind of frame our conversation and our thinking around these 7 hazards that are present in Clark County. And I just want to note, this is not an exhaustive list of all the natural hazards that affect the county, but these are climate-specific hazards. And so if you look in the box there on the right side of the slide, this is an excerpt from the House Bill 1181 legislation, and what we're talking about when we're referring to climate hazards are natural hazards created or aggravated by climate change. So that narrows our focus a little bit. And then the ones they offer as examples are sea level rise, landslides, flooding, drought, heat, smoke, wildfire, and other effects of changes to temperature and precipitation. So this list, I know, doesn't capture everything that everyone is concerned about in the county. One that really stands out that we've heard in this group, as well as in the EJC, is an interest in extreme cold. That didn't make the list after some internal deliberation because extreme cold isn't something that we can make a strong case for. It's not something that we can project as a future outcome of climate change. In fact, all of the projections that we do have indicate that temperatures are getting warmer in all seasons, that we're likely to have fewer really cold days. So that's why that's not on the list, just as an example. So we're really focused on those hazards that are created or aggravated by climate change. So just going to do some quick definitions of these hazards. We can revisit this at the end if folks have more questions. But for drought, what we're talking about is changes in timing or amount of precipitation. So in Clark County, we're looking at more annual precipitation overall, but decreasing precipitation in the summertime or the warm season. So we'll be seeing some changes in the timing of precipitation, changes in stream flow and water availability, and also changes in snowpack. The extreme heat hazard, as you might suspect, is really about higher summertime temperatures, although we can also think about how warming in all seasons might have impacts on daily life and operations and ecosystems. Flooding includes a few different types of flooding. So there's riverine or stream bank overflow kind of flooding. So when a stream flows over its banks. There's also urban drainage related or nuisance flooding included under this hazard. So if you think about a time where it's been raining a bit or a lot and the natural or man-made drainage systems in an area just can't keep up and you have standing water. And then this also includes inland tidal flooding. That's an indirect result of sea level rise. So we're not calling sea level rise a direct hazard affecting Clark County, but when sea level rise occurs, because of the tidal nature of the Columbia River, we actually can get some inland tidal flooding, especially in western and southern Clark County. Extreme precipitation and storms has to do with changes in the intensity and type of precipitation that the county will see. So we can pretty well predict with existing projections that there's going to be an increase in the amount of precipitation as rainfall and also the intensity of rainstorms. And we also anticipate more windstorms accompanying heavy rains. I will note here, snow and ice storms are still possible under climate change. When we're having intense precipitation events, if the elevation is high enough, if the temperature is low enough, that precipitation could still fall as snow in the winter time, but it's not as likely, and snow and ice, again, are not really predictable outcomes of climate change. So we want to focus primarily on rain and windstorms here. Landslides, we're talking shallow landslides and mudslides that would be brought on mainly by extreme precipitation and hillside flooding. Wildfire would be active fires burning in Clark County, and then wildfire smoke, that could be from a local fire, or it could be from a fire hundreds of miles away, which we've experienced here locally recently. Next slide, please. Okay, so after talking about hazards last time, we also had you all share some of the impacts that you've encountered in your daily lives, your personal lives. So some things that we heard were harm to local farmers from crop deaths, pests that tend to thrive in warmer environments. Some folks expressed just feelings of stress and fear related to concern about power outages, fires, also worrying about the safety of others, so family members, as well as those who are unsheltered and exposed to climate hazards. We heard about sensory distress for children and other sensitive populations, ecological impacts from stream bank erosion and elevated water temperature resulting from heat and flooding. And then just, of course, I think many of us have experienced this, especially when it's really hot or it's really smoky, you just can't go outside and kind of go about your day-to-day business, and that can really be discouraging after an extended period of time. And then finally, all sorts of climate hazards can cause costly damage to vehicles, residences, and personal property. So that's some of what we heard from you last time. Next slide, please. And the last thing, or to wrap up our meeting last time, I think it was right at the end, we had you all participate in this community assets identification exercise. So just as a reminder, we have these 11 sectors that are on the right side of the screen. These are provided by the Department of Commerce, and they're just an organizational tool. It gives us some buckets to put our thinking into because we're dealing with a lot of information here. So we're talking about these 11 sectors. So last time we asked you to help us brainstorm some assets within each sector that we should be keeping in mind when we're thinking about climate impacts and solutions. So assets, again, are things that currently exist in Clark County. So not things that we're hoping for, but things that are already here. Valued groups, places, resources, infrastructure, and services that could be negatively impacted by climate change and that you would like to protect. And I'll just note, because this did come up in some feedback, Not everyone agrees about what is an asset or not. Some people consider something an asset and someone else might consider it very problematic. So just want to acknowledge that assets are subjective. But we got some great feedback from you all last time and have incorporated that into a larger list of assets, which is about 90 items long at this point and covers all sorts of things across the sectors. Am I ready to go to the next slide? Yes. Next slide, please. All right, this is my last slide. So just to bring that all back together here, coming up, how we're going to use the information that you've all provided so far. We've heard your inputs on the assets that are important to you, the impacts that you have experienced. The county is taking that in. We, the consultants, have taken that in, and we're going to continue to think about that and refer to those things as we're working on upcoming vulnerability and risk assessments for the county, and also as we move into this process of thinking about policies and the broader planning goal that we're all working towards here. So for today, as we've already kind of hinted at, we're going to ask you all to help us brainstorm some resilience goals based on the hazards and the impacts and the assets that we've been talking about. And I will say, same as the vision statement, this is just the first touch. This is the first pass at thinking about goals. And this is going to continue to come up in meetings for at least the next couple months and probably beyond. So I will now, oh no, I'm not turning it over. We have Q&A. Turn it to myself.
Yeah, we'll just see if there's any questions or thoughts on what Dana presented. Yeah, Brent.
Brent, thank you, Dana. That was an excellent presentation. And as she started that, talking about resilience, I thought, yes, this has to do with vision. So I think this is something that should be very strongly considered, because this really addresses what we're here for, resilience, according to this definition.
Great, thank you, Brent. And Sharon Ferguson?
Yes, I had a question. The climate projections that you mentioned for each of the areas mentioned, will that information be included in the final plan?
Yeah, this is Jenna. I can chime in on that. We will need to include some background information in the chapter that we write, sort of a typical comprehensive plan chapter, includes some information about the county before we then get into the goals and policies. So while we haven't started drafting it yet, in my head, I think it does make sense to talk about, at least at a summary level, the key climate impacts that are projected here for the county. So, so yes, to what level of detail, I'm not quite sure yet, because we haven't thought about that too much yet.
Right, so it seems we need to kind of identify what the threats are that we're facing, and then what we're doing to address those threats.
Yes, so there's a couple versions of impact that we're working on putting words to and thinking through. So one type of impact is just simply, what is the change in this indicator? So an increase in the number of 90+ degree days per year. Let's say, I'm pulling this number off the top of my head, please don't refer to this number, but I think the projection for number of days over 90 degrees in Clark County in the next 30-year period is plus 12 or 16 days per year, something like that. So that's one way to think about impact, is just what is that change in an indicator. And then another way that we're working on talking about impacts is what is the effect of this change on different sectors? And then it'll be up to everyone in this group, as well as others providing feedback, to help weigh in on which of those impacts are worth doing something about. So not every impact might be determined to be worth acting on. But we're trying, we have a lot of spreadsheets going behind the scenes here of all the possible impacts that we might be talking about. And we'll do our best to kind of bring that publicly here so everyone can comment and weigh in on what's important to them.
Anything else on that, Sharon? All right, Don?
No, that's
This
it.
is Don.
Thank you.
This is Don Steinke. There are impacts to us that take place elsewhere, and then the climate takes place elsewhere and it affects our economy here. For example, if we lose the ability to irrigate the crops in eastern Washington, then the Port of Vancouver, which is one of the largest grain exporters in the world or in North America, that'll be an economic impact. And if we're losing snow, we have a snow drought. And if we're losing snowpack, then we're losing electricity. And in fact, I believe that one of the reasons why our rates went up for the electricity was because we didn't have enough electricity for a peak demand because last year we didn't have as much water in the system, Columbia River system, as we do now. I don't know where that should fit in, but just keep in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I agree. We can definitely, as we're writing final reports and thinking about packaging this, I like that, at least referring to that fact that outside of the county, there's a lot happening. I mean, wildfire smoke is a really good example of that too. That's really visceral, and we've all experienced it. Like, not just what's happening in the county, even though we're really focused on the projections for this county. So yes, thank you for flagging that, and we'll definitely work that into our narrative.
All right, thanks, Dana. And let's go to Andrea, and then we'll take a quick break.
Yeah, Andrea with the tag or the CAG. I know. I have a sinus infection currently, so I'm like not all the way there in my mind. So apologies. I was just curious, and we might get into this later as we dive deep into it, but is there an ability to differentiate between wildfires and like urban fires? You know, the like ability to respond and make sure that like, it doesn't spread as fast varies a lot. So I was just curious if that's going to come up at all.
That's an interesting question. I think for the purposes of talking about climate change induced fire, we are talking about fires that at least originate in natural areas or at that kind of that wildland urban interface. So they may very well spread into urban areas, but they're not originating as like a house fire. For example, we're more talking about fires that result from dry fuel conditions. And yeah, so I guess, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if Jenna wants to weigh in on this, but I don't necessarily see a place for urban originating fires in the climate hazards conversation.
Dana, maybe we can talk offline a little bit more, because I'm just thinking about some examples here where, I mean, even if someone sets off like a fireworks, right, and the conditions are dry enough, anyway, I don't want to, because the climate conditions are making the dry conditions, right? But anyway, that's a whole other conversation that we should think about some more offline.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. Let's take a break and get back together at 6:55. So we're just a tiny bit behind schedule, but I think we'll be okay. So folks in the room, grab some more food if you want, and if you're online, just do what you want to do, but be back here by 6:55. All right. See you then. All right. Well, I think we're ready to get started again here. We're having a nice discussion here about what is and isn't being recorded. We're back online, so now conversation will be recorded. All right. So we are going to move into our resiliency goals brainstorm, but first Dana is going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the process for developing the resilience goals and policy, kind of what that looks like, and then we'll dive into our brainstorming activity. So over to you, Dana.
Thank you. We'll keep this quick. I know everyone's eager to brainstorm. So the goal and policy list process is kind of the next big piece that we're working on here for the resilience sub-element. And our task related to goal and policy list ultimately is to first come up with a list of goals for each sector, each of those 11 sectors that I mentioned earlier. And then we want to identify at least one policy for each goal. So we can identify more than one policy, but we're tasked with coming up with at least one policy per goal. And so one way to think about this might be the goals are what you would like to see, and the policies give some direction for how to make that happen. And I have two examples here on the right. These are goals and policies that are in the existing Clark County Comprehensive Plan. So this is just to give you an idea of what the end point of goal and policy work looks like. So one goal is to protect and conserve environmentally critical areas. We can think of that as part of the ecosystems sector. And the policy, one of many policies in that plan that goes with that goal is protect groundwater and surface water as a resource for drinking water, commerce, recreation, and wildlife. And then another type of goal we have there in the second box would be provide assistance for maintenance and rehabilitation for housing for Clark County residents. We could think of that as fitting into the buildings and energy sector. And a policy that matches with that goal is encourage the creation of housing that is energy efficient, resource efficient, and has high indoor air quality. So it's easy to get goals and policies mixed up. They're often very similar in how they're framed, but these are just a couple of examples to start your brains working today on this. So yeah, we're going to start the process just of brainstorming goals for today. And once we have that, we're going to work on matching goals first to existing policies. Can I get the next slide, please, Nicole? Thank you. So we've reviewed these 6 plans from the county and identified resilience-related policies that are already out there in existing plans. So as a first pass, we're going to try to match the goals that you help us come up with to existing policies. We also have something called the menu of measures, which you may have seen that was provided by the Department of Commerce, and it also includes a lot of kind of generic policy language that we can adopt into this process. And then we can also think about developing new policy language to match your goals if that's needed later on. So this is going to be an iterative, ongoing process. We're just starting with goal brainstorm today. This is going to go back and forth between the CAG and the EJC a couple of times. We have the countywide engagement efforts that Jenna referred to earlier. We're going to be getting feedback and input from those processes and factor those in. And then we'll also have some technical reviewers at the county weighing in on goals and policies. And then much later in the year, we're going to do final prioritization of, not quite yet, but that's okay. Much later in the year, we're going to do final prioritization of policies, which will be the point at which you all kind of choose what you want to recommend for the final plan. Okay, now next slide, please, Nicole. Thank you. And this is just a visual of what I just described. So we're in the upper left bubble right now. We're brainstorming resilience goals with the CAG. At the upcoming EJC meeting, we'll ask that group to review the goal ideas that came out of this meeting, expand on them as needed. Then CAPA is going to make a first pass at matching your goals to existing policies. We'll also help, one thing I didn't say is you don't need to feel like you have to express your goal ideas today in that really formal plan language. Part of our task is to take the ideas that you share and help translate them into plan language. So anyway, we'll be working on matching your goals to existing policies first. And then that's going to come back to this group again. We'll talk about what policies we found, talk about some gaps. We'll again kind of work behind the scenes to fill in some of those gaps from the menu of measures or with new policy language. And then the EJC will get another chance to review the goal and policy list, particularly evaluating it through the equity lens that they're working on. And then all of us together are going to kind of keep moving forward into that process of prioritization and thinking about which goals and policies are most important to all of you to include in the final plan. And that's it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia for our activity.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to move into our brainstorming, which we're going to do both online and in the room. And so really here, we're asking you to think about the future and resiliency. You know, we know climate impacts are coming. What would it look like for our community to be more resilient to climate change? So what could that look like? What are desired outcomes and hopes for the future related to that? And for this activity, you will be using this handout. This is very important in your packets. If you're online, this is the unincorporated Clark County Impacts and Resilience Goals table. It's the handout that has a table with sectors, key impacts, and example resilience goals on it. And I'll go through that a little bit more in just a second. But we're going to ask you to organize your thoughts into kind of the 11 sectors that are listed here. Again, like Dana described before, these sectors are really an organizing principle for the plan, which is why they're broken out this way, but they are sometimes really interrelated. So if you have an idea today and you don't know which sector it belongs to, that's okay. You can just put your ideas up, but that's kind of how we're organizing the activity. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here's an example of kind of what we might be asking you to do. So in front of you, you have some sticky notes, and online you're going to use a Jamboard, which we'll show you in just a second. But on the slide here are some examples. So if you look at your sheet, one of the sectors, the first one here, is agriculture and food systems. And one of the impacts that we could anticipate in this sector from climate change are that wildfires will result in fire damage to plants and animals. And so you might be thinking, okay, what would it look like to be more resilient to that impact of increased wildfires? So maybe one goal would be that forests and natural areas are managed to better coexist with fire. So that's an example. There are a couple of more examples here. For example, under the emergency management sector that's on your sheet, you'll see an impact that says that there will be increased heat, fire, smoke, and other climate impacts will lead to higher demand for emergency services. So how could we be more resilient for that? To that, one goal could be that community members are better prepared individually to cope with weather emergencies, right? So on and on. So those are just some examples again. And we also want to point out that today we're talking about goals related to resiliency. There's a whole other section of the climate element that's about greenhouse gas reduction goals and strategies. So we're going to repeat this whole activity with goals and policies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So you don't have to worry about that today. Today we're really talking about what do we do to make our community more resilient in the face of climate change. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and I'll open it up to questions in just a second if this activity isn't making sense. But if you're in the room, what you'll do is, look at this sheet, consider maybe there's some sectors that you're just more connected with due to your work or just your background or personally, and think about the list of impacts here. And maybe there's, there might be other impacts that aren't listed here, but really have to do with one of these sectors. And think about what would you want to see as a desired outcome or a goal to be resilient to that impact. And then write that down on a sticky note and just put it up on these sheets around the room with the sectors. I think I heard they're in alphabetical order, starting over there and going around the room. If you can't find your sector, because there's 11 of them, it's a lot. And if you're online, then we're going to have you use Jamboard to do the same thing. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to explain how to do that.
Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
I'm like trying to talk into. Oh. Okay. Hold on. Let me share my. Okay. So for those of you online, we'll share a link to this Jamboard, which will mirror the flip charts that we have here in the room. And so you can go and scroll through the different boards, and each has a different sector. And we've put the impacts that are in that handout just on these boards so you have them there for reference. You don't have to go back and forth. And so to put a sticky note with a goal for each sector, you can come over here, grab a sticky note, type something, save, and it'll be on the board. And Grant and I will try to move these around so they don't just all stick in the same place and get a little bit annoying. So that's how folks online will participate in the activity, and we'll put the link to the Jamboard in the chat momentarily.
Thank you, Nicole. And also, if you're trying to access the Jamboard and you're online and it's just not working for you, just write your idea in the chat, and our staff can try to move it into the Jamboard for you. And we'll have about 30 minutes for this to just, brainstorm, walk around the room, put your ideas up, be in the Jamboard for half an hour, and, think to yourself. You can also talk to each other, of course, like with your ideas. And then we'll still have time for about, 20-ish minutes of discussion to just look around and see what's been written and kind of reflect on it. And again, this is first chance at goals. We'll have other meetings to do this too. Any questions before we dive in here?
Okay, you've used Google, you've used Microsoft. Where's the Apple stuff at here? Well, you aren't using it. Oh, it is Apple. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we included here.
Thank you, Nick. We are technology agnostic here. We accept all types of brands, so thanks for pointing that out. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, let's dive in and do this brainstorming, and I will, let's go until about 7:35-ish. So, if you're online and you need to take a break or something, just be back by 7:35 to resume the group discussion. But with that, we're just gonna let you go for it. And I just got a reminder from folks in the room, on the PowerPoint that's being shared right now is the slide that really defines kind of the question prompt for you to be thinking about as you come up with these goals. For CAG members that are online, we just want to make a reminder that in the Jamboard, at the very top, you'll see a little toggle that says 1 through 11, and there's 11 kind of slides that you can toggle through with the different sector topics like agriculture and food systems, buildings and energy, cultural resources, economic development, et cetera. So feel free to kind of toggle through those to find one and put your sticky notes on those as well. We're just noticing a lot of folks on the first page, so we want to make sure that you're aware that there's other ones as well. All right, everyone, we're going to do about 2 more minutes on this activity, and then we'll kind of discuss as a group. Grant, can you hear me? Oh. Can you hear me online, Grant?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for all of the great ideas. Looking around the room here, I'm impressed with how many different ideas there are in each of the sectors. Like sometimes you just get this grouping and they're all really similar, but there's a lot of different diverse ideas, which is great. So I'm going to just kind of go to each of the sectors and read a little bit about what we're hearing and stop after every 2 or 3 sectors just to see if you all have reflections or just want to make any additional comments on what we heard. Again, today we're not trying to prioritize these goals or cull them into a list. It's really just brainstorming. So we don't need to talk about like, you know, which ideas have priority or which ones might be better at reducing or improving our resilience, but kind of just reflections or anything you want to add to what's being said. So I'll start with agriculture and food systems, and I'll also have Nicole look at the Jamboard and bring in some of those ideas too. And folks in the room, feel free to like have a field trip and walk over here with me if you'd like, but up to you. Okay, so for agriculture and food systems, we're seeing some ideas around wanting to increase assistance to family farms, reducing factory farming, making sure there's water for agricultural uses, having alternate food resources in case of hunger, and protecting livestock from disasters. And Nicole from the Jamboard.
We have things about protecting protecting land for agriculture, better distribution of food locally, encouraging the use of sustainable practices. And I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah.
Okay, I'll maybe stop after this one since it's our first one, see if folks have anything they want to add or reflect on from some of those lists. And if someone's on the line and has a comment, just let me know, Nicole. All right, I'll just keep going then. So in the buildings and energy sector, a lot of comments here. There were some around interest in more funding for efficiency retrofits, especially like rebates, tax credits, and more energy conservation in buildings, having backup electricity sources in case of power outages or incapacity of electric sources, making sure that heating and cooling is affordable for everyone, reducing reliance on all electric appliances to protect against acts of terrorism. And then there was this kind of whole grouping of essentially reducing reliance on fossil fuels and supporting alternate energy sources. So lots of ideas in that category around, net zero energy, more heat pumps, water heaters, thermal energy networks, supporting renewable gas, hydrogen conversion, etc. And in the Jamboard, anything on buildings and energy to call out?
I think we had some similar comments. There was one about protecting utilities in the grid to be more resilient in the face of climate impacts. But I think pretty similar comments as well.
Great, thanks. Anything that folks want to add? And also maybe staff like Dana, Jenna, if you want to ask questions back or get more clarity on any of these, that would be great too. But I'll turn it to the group.
I would like to add.
No. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm echoing. One I heard with the rebates, upfront rebates, would be very, very helpful. Instead of the one where you get it afterwards, after you buy it and then get it. And then also into looking into the technologies like glass that is used as a solar panel. So getting more research done on what kind of technologies that are out there. And also there's another one where this device pulls moisture from the air and cools and heats your home. And so just getting more of the technology that's out there to build a resilient building. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Monica. All right, I'll move on to cultural resources and practices. So here we saw interest in more access to mental health facilities or services that are culturally appropriate, and also make sure that a sense of community is restored in the event, if there is a climate event. And online?
Okay, I think, okay. We have digitally preserved sites of cultural importance, and then also work with partners to establish and sustain native plant nurseries and seed banks.
All right, any comments, reflections, additions?
A thought is since we are a growing Vancouver and Clark County with many different cultures coming in, and we need to also reach out to those communities and what makes them feel like home, because this is also their home too, but then also, yes, the native plants and everything, but we need to really make this home everyone's home. So just reaching out to those communities to say, like, what do you need? And also have available translators for that as well.
Great, thank you, Monica. Yes, Jenna? Perfect. All right, we're going to move to economic development. So here there was interest in supporting more renewable energy technologies, making sure that property owners have good access to property insurance in case of climate impacts, making jobs closer to housing, using rail to move deliveries around instead of relying on other more emitting sources, and educating the public on on preservation and restoring access to natural resources. And on, yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, similar comments about incentivizing less travel and moving goods and also recycled materials in the supply chain. There's a few comments on investing in broadband infrastructure. And then helping businesses prepare for natural disasters and also recover from them. And then some comments about training people for jobs that are needed during hazards.
Any other reflections or comments on economic development? This is not awkward at all, Jenna. Okay. All right, let's move on to ecosystems. So here, there were some comments on a couple on decreasing vegetation or increasing vegetation that's drought resistant, or making sure that vegetation is not near structures to reduce wildfires, and then tracking insect migrations, which could be carrying diseases, and then also making sure septic systems operate adequately so they're not polluting water, making incremental improvements to critical ecosystems, and then making sure that ecosystems are connected.
And then in the Jamboard, we have comments about habitat restoration, building infrastructure or natural structures to help communities withstand heavy rain, and then also planting edible landscapes or native plants.
All right, any thoughts on those? I'll just keep going. And then for emergency management, there were a lot of comments here, several on just the need for really good lines of communication between public agencies and the public and just with each other. Some ideas for having neighborhood associations create kind of neighborhood level crisis plans together, and then making sure that law enforcement and firefighters have the resources they need. There were several comments on making sure that we have good response plans and rehearsing those response plans in case of emergency. Making sure that people are just more self-reliant themselves because programs are likely to be stretched, so kind of supporting self-reliance programs. Making sure that there's emergency drinking water, emergency shelters, and being able to communicate with isolated communities and households that might not always have good lines of communication.
And then online, similar comments about communication during disasters. There was one comment about investing in other types of communication technology. Starlink was mentioned, and establishing adequate battery storage, and similar comments about establishing emergency plans or transportation plan and quicker response times.
To add on to that, there needs to be a place where people know where to go, like even a physical place or something where they can get this information also in different languages, because it just seems like this information is scattered everywhere. And so there needs to be like a place they can call, website, and go physically. So it's really like, hey, we're actually trying to reach out to you. And then all the other organizations can come to and share their information there too.
Thanks, Monica. All right, I'll move on to health and well-being. And here, some of these are related to the ones on emergency management too, like emergency childcare facilities, community resilience forums so that people can be prepared in case of emergency, and having better emergency medical facilities, especially since some of the main medical facilities might be incapacitated. And then there was also interest in promoting more ownership over rentals to reduce the cycle of poverty and build wealth. And then educating the public on the importance of property insurance and promoting more property insurance for folks in case of disaster.
Sorry. And then in our Jamboard, accessibility to shelters and resources needed, and targeting resources to vulnerable populations, investing in the ability for hyperlocal communities to organize pop-up locations for childcare, education, mental health, et cetera. And then also investing or providing access to affordable, healthy food and incentivizing organic agriculture, better monitoring PM 2.5, educating people about the risk, and fostering exercise programs.
Great. Going around for comments. All right, I'll move on to transportation, and then we'll have a few more. So in transportation, there was interest in discouraging single modes of transportation and having escape routes in case of different scenarios, and then wanting to incentivize renewable aviation fuels and using lower carbon asphalt in transportation construction. And then like electric everything, electric buses, trucks, rail, just really making sure that we're moving away from fossil fuels, encouraging more transit-oriented development and bike lanes that are safer and easier for people to use.
Similar comments on the Jamboard, investing in carbon light roadways, interconnected pedestrian routes, and disincentivizing the use of large and larger trucks.
To add on to that, upfront rebates for this thing that you can put onto your bike if you already have it. It makes your bike into an electric bike. You just put it right on the back of your wheel, and it just zoom, right does that. And so giving upfront rebates to do that, and also for a bike or something, because we need to make it easy for people to actually go over and to the electric. Yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, Nick.
Can you go into more of what this upfront rebate is? I'm very confused about this. Are people going to give you money to get it before you purchase the item, or what's that?
I think it's at point of sale.
Oh, it's a point of sale. Okay. As long as there's a point of sale on for it, but I just trying to understand what this rebate thing is.
Yeah, it's the point of sale.
More on Monica? Yeah.
Yes, it was the point of sale. It's what they did in their plan for the Washington State electric vehicle plan. Sorry, and that was one thing that was in. I'm like repeating the same thing I just said. It's the transportation electrification plan for Washington State to go all electric. And one of the things that I said is that it would have been so much better to get an upfront rebate to go to the dealership to say, hey, I have this much money to give you right now. And then I could have gotten a lease on an electric vehicle rather than getting this loan that was only for $9,000, and it was for a used EV, and a used EV has a shorter lifespan battery life, and it was like 50 miles to the full charge. And I was like, if I just had that upfront, like money to give to that dealership, I could have gotten a better one and with better mileage, and it would have saved me such a headache. And so, and because I don't have that money saved up, I'm barely making rent. And so if I could have gone, like you said, you were concerned of like giving money. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's going to the dealership or going to like a bike store or going to that electric vehicle manufacturer for those EV bike add-ons and getting that specific device or that thing that I would want to get, not just give me money and I'll promise to get that thing. So yeah, that's more. I hope that's more of a clarification.
Great, thank you, Monica. All right, and I'll go talk about waste management and water resources together here. So for waste management, there was interested in using more compost and food waste as feedstock and wastewater solids as feedstock. So kind of linking it to agriculture. And support for materials recycling companies in order to just do more reuse and repurposing of materials, and reducing the rules on solid waste regarding vegetative debris. And then for water resources, just more interest in using cisterns to store rainwater and having more localized water distribution, making sure that drinking water is always maintained and healthy, and then ensuring stormwater facilities our size to accommodate more rain in the future.
Don't think we have any in the water resources one on the Jamboard, but there is a question on the waste management one saying, do you mean excess woody debris? I don't know if the person that had that question wants to chime in.
Yeah, maybe we'll go, but before we go to Nick, did somebody online have a question about woody debris that they want to pose? Oh, that was your.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to share with the group that sometimes the Department of Ecology trips over their own feet when we're trying to bring like woody debris into. I run East County Materials out there, and we tried to bring woody debris in. It's treated as a solid waste and as a solid waste, and so it took me 1.5 years to get my permit. And we would allow people to bring their yard clippings and everything else to recycle into compost, but since the Department of Ecology makes it a solid waste, it's very difficult to do. So that was kind of my point on that. It's hard to, we trip over each other on getting stuff to this point.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Nick.
I also want to add
All
something.
right, and go ahead, Monica.
Thank you. It was for the compost and those items over in India. They're actually making their compost into electricity. I shared it with you all in an email, but it's and they're also making it again to use as fertilizer for their crops. And so adding something like that. And also another great resource is a man named Pete Dubois. He is composting Pete. And so reaching out to him of any ideas, what could be done to help with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Monica. All right, and then last but not least, we have the zoning and development sector. So here there are ideas for more tax breaks for solar panels, making sure there's more infill development, supporting that with amenity-rich communities, allowing for a diversity of land uses, especially when adding open space, allowing for cluster lot subdivisions, and then looking through zoning and development regulations through an affordability lens to make sure that working class households aren't cost burdened.
In the Jamboard, we have comments about increasing code enforcement, developing consequences for violators of environmental policies, designed to protect open space, ag land, agricultural land, and waterways, own policies that conserve open space, protecting soil-rich parcels with land use laws, and not allowing development on food-producing agricultural rural zoned land.
Great, thanks, Nicole. All right, well, I'll open up to the group to see, just looking at all of these great ideas for goals, just any reflections you have or any questions you have for each other, and staff too, if you have any reflections or questions you want to ask back. Yeah, Brent?
Brent, I just want to say that I think we did a great job. I think we came up with a lot of ideas, and when this was first presented, I thought it was going to be more of a challenge, and I could have probably done even more. And so I think this was very good.
That's great. Thanks, Brent. And fortunately, you still can do more, which we'll talk about in a second, but I'll see if there's any other kind of reflections or comments too, both in the room and online. Yeah, Don?
I don't know if it was mentioned or not under ag, but protecting ag land is really important. I don't know if that came in or not, but anyway, so reducing sprawl or reversing sprawl maybe.
Thanks, Don. Great. Okay, well, I'll turn it over to Dana to talk about next steps, which I think include a little bit on getting more ideas.
Yes. And I'll just second Brent's comments. This is so exciting. I'm so thrilled at all the ideas that just came out of that brainstorm, and I'm really looking forward to diving into those. So thanks everyone for your participation there. Yeah, so like I mentioned, our next step is to take all of these ideas that you've come up with and bring them to the next EJC meeting and ask the EJC to kind of reflect on the list of goals that came out of this meeting as a starting point, and then add some additional ideas of their own. And once we have all that together, we can start the initial process of matching goals to existing policies. And as you'll see there on the slide, we welcome additional input on this. So if things come to your mind outside of this meeting, we still want to hear your ideas. So feel free to send any ideas that you have to Jenna. We just ask that you please submit those by the 26th at 5 p.m. so we have a chance to get them into the EJC meeting. Yeah, Nick?
Nick Massey. Is the EJC going to add more goals to this, or are they just going to review what we did?
They will be invited to add more, yeah. Okay, any other questions, thoughts? All right, well, we did a lot of work. Thank you everyone for participating in that. It's great to see all the ideas. And I think we are ready for public comment, and we're just a little bit ahead of schedule. So I will call now, just if you go to the next slide for the public comment instructions, if you don't mind. So if you are a member of the public and would like to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand with the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And if you're on the phone, then you can press *9 to raise your hand. And I'll just see if there's anyone that wants to make a comment before I go through the instructions. All right, I see at least one from a phone number. So in a minute, I'll call your phone number, not your name. Usually I would say your name. I'll just say phone number. So we just encourage you to make about a 2-minute comment, and focusing on what we talked about today is most useful. But of course, any comments related to the climate element are accepted. And if you are a member of the public and you want to submit a written comment instead, you can do that by sending an email to comp.plan@clark.wa.gov. So I'll go ahead and ask Grant to unmute the person who's from phone number 360977. And go ahead and make your comment. And remember to just say your name before you make your comment.
Hi, my name is Tina Barrows. I have two things to say. So first of all, I want to respond to, I didn't catch that person's name, but the person who had a concern on the vision statement and who was worried that there was like social justice goals in there, and they were concerned that the environmental emergency was too urgent to be kind of delayed by that. And I just wanted to say to them that I feel you, and I used to 100% agree with that. And over the last few years that I've been involved with environmental activism, I have noticed that it doesn't seem to work that way, that we can't have one without the other. And yeah, so I think the vision statement is good as it is. And then the other comment I just wanted to drop there, and I'm hoping everybody has an open mind towards that, is on the management goals when it comes to waste management. At some point, I'm very much hoping that your group might consider dealing with human waste differently, as with the goal of saving water, because using current like flush toilets uses a lot of water, and there is options and ways that a human excrement, human waste, can be composted and used directly as an organic fertilizer. And I know, for example, the city of Vancouver is working on upping their system to where they can still use the flush toilets to then filter out the solid waste and use it as a fertilizer, but I feel that still using a lot of drinking water and looking at climate change as it is with decreased water flow and decreased drinking water availability, I think even though a lot of people probably think this is gross, this needs to be a consideration. And I'd be happy to, I don't know, brainstorm with people about that at some later point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate your comment. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? You can just raise your hand with the little icon at the bottom of the screen. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'll go ahead and move us to our next step slide. All right, so you have a little bit of homework, which I think is less homework than maybe we gave you last time, so that's a positive, and it's just to send any other ideas that you have on the resilience goals to Jenna at her email address by Friday, April 26th, especially if you want them to kind of be part of what's going to be presented to the EJC. Of course, we're going to continue to be talking about the goals, but that would be the deadline for making sure they get to the EJC, which meets next Monday. And then if you have not completed your Open Public Meetings Act training, please do that by May 22nd. And I think that's our last slide. Never mind, there's one more, which is your next meeting is on May 22nd at 5:30. And just a reminder, you can get any resources you need at the CAG webpage that's on the screen here. And if you have any questions or comments, you can contact Jenna. And I will turn it over to Jenna if you have anything to say to close us out.
Just thank you all again for your time. We know these meetings are late in the evening and they're long, so really appreciate you all being here, both in person and online. And yeah, I really appreciate the feedback, the conversation, the ideas. It's really helpful for us and what we're trying to do, so thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, bye.